Alright, so here's our plan for the day. We're doing questions, like how to ask and answer questions, demonstratives, which is like words like this, that, over there, here, there, all that stuff. And then I had some people get a little confused on particles last time, specifically the ni and de particles. So we're going to review those also, and then, of course, open the floor to other questions if there are any other problems, concerns, things I need to re-explain or explain better. So we're going to review particles super fast. So last lesson, like I said, we did particles. Just take a second and put in the particles that you think are correct in these 5 sentences, and we will review them. Tokyo, blank, ikimasu. This is the verb I go, so you're going towards something, so there's movement. So you have to use ni for that. Ni ikimasu, just a reminder, is basically a phrase that you can just memorize. Ni iku, ni ikimasu, that kind of stuff. Because you're always moving when you use this verb. Number 2, hon, blank, yomimasu. Reading a book. You're reading an object. You're reading something. What are you reading? A book. So you use the o particle. Number 3, watashi, blank, nihonjin desu. You're talking about the subject, which is yourself, which is watashi. So you have to use watashi wa nihonjin desu. Number 4, I study at school. Gakko, blank, benkyou shimasu. So this is probably where some people will get confused. The answer here is de, because you are already at a place. You are already at school. You're not going to school, like number 1 is. You're not going to school. You are already there, and you're performing an action at this place. So that's why it's de, because you're already there. There's no movement. You're sitting down at school, and you are studying. You are doing the action. So that's why it's de. I watched the movie. Eiga, blank, mimasu. You're watching an object in this case. So, eiga o mimasu. Let me know how you did. Let me know if you have any questions. I see for number 4, ni question mark, which I don't blame you. Yeah, that's why we're reviewing this, because ni versus de is a whole thing to deal with. So, ni and de, a little bit of review real quick. Ni is where things are and where you're going. De is what you do at a place. So when you're using de, you always have to have some kind of action verb. So the example for de is gakko de benkyou shimasu, same thing that we just talked about. You can change it also to gakko de tabemasu. You're eating at school. That works too, because you are at the place performing an action of some kind. You can change that to anything. Gakko de odorimasu. You're dancing at school. Like, anything like that. You can change it to anything and it still applies, because you're not moving from the location. You're still at the same location. Still at the place. You're not going there. You're not leaving. You're not moving. You're staying there and performing an action. Now for ni, that's existence or movement, things like that. So, gakko ni imasu is I am at school. That is, you are at this place. Essentially, the difference between the two is gakko ni imasu is I am at school. I am standing in the middle of the school. You're just standing there. Gakko de benkyou shimasu, you're at school, but you're performing an action of studying. You're doing the thing. You're studying. Or tabemasu, odorimasu, utaimasu, anything like that. Like singing, dancing, eating, walking, whatever. You're doing an action at this place. Just a little bit of extra something for ni and de, just real quick. Let's go through these. I'm going to do the first one with you, and then the others you can do on your own super fast. Mai asa, shichiji, blank, okimasu. I wake up every day at 7 a.m. Mai asa is every morning. Alright. So we're talking about time. This is a review that I did in my last lesson too. When you're talking about time, you always use ni. So, maiasa shichiji ni okimasu. That's just something to remember. It's like ni ikimasu. Always use ni with that, always use ni with time. Toshokan for number 2. Toshokan, that's library, that's a location, by the way. So, give this a try, and then we'll go over it. Let's give this a shot. And if you're confused at all, that's completely fine. Ask questions or just, let it sit in your head for a second. That's all good too. Alright. Number 2. Toshokan blank hon o yomimashita. The second part is a whole set phrase of hon o yomimashita is I read a book. The translation would be I read a book at the library. You are actively doing an action of reading the book at a place. That's de. Toshokan de hon o yomimashita. Number 3. There's 2 here. So let's work backwards. The, second and third parts of that would be gakko blank ikimasu. That is a set phrase of ni ikimasu. You're going somewhere. The first part is basu. So you're taking a bus to go to school. Or the literal translation would be I go to school by bus. There we go. So, transportation. That's another set phrase that we learned last week too. Basu de, because it's just a way of transportation. You can change that if it was densha for train, kuruma, car, either one. You can change that, but it will still be de. So, basu de gakko ni ikimasu. So, if you change the beginning, it's still the same. For car, it'd be kuruma de gakko ni ikimasu. Tomodachi blank presento o agemashita. I gave a present to my friend. Now this one could be a little weird. It is ni because it is showing direction. You are giving a present to somebody, showing the direction of where the present is going. So, tomodachi ni presento o agemashita. I gave the present this direction. I gave it to my friend. It would be the same thing if you change it, because subjects are kind of understood in Japanese. So you could say tomodachi wa, being the friend, gives a present to me, so it'd be tomodachi wa watashi ni presento o agemashita. But yeah, for that example, it would be showing direction of where that present is going, so that's why it's ni. And the last one, koen, is park. So koen blank sakka o shimasu. Playing soccer at the park. You are doing an action. You're doing the thing. You are playing soccer. That is a action verb. So it's de. You're doing it at the park. Same thing if it was at school or at somewhere else, whatever. It would be de. So koen de sakka o shimasu. Demonstratives. These are words that are used to indicate people, objects, places based on their distance from the speaker or the listener. When you're speaking, imagine yourself just speaking to one of your friends, just someone else, and you're holding a book, something like this. If it is near you, you are the one that is speaking. Watashi is speaking. If it's near you, you use ko in the beginning. Kore is this, and koko is here. So it all follows the same pattern of ko, so, a, do. Think of it like that. If it is close to you, the speaker, I'm gonna go with book. So this book, we'll do that. Kore hon, for example. If it is near the speaker, which is you, it is kore hon. You use ko at the beginning. If it is near the listener and far away from the speaker, you use sore hon, which is that. It's very similar to English with this, that, or that over there, something like that. Because a is far from both the speaker and the listener, so you would use are, which is all the way over there. That thing over there that you're pointing at. Think you're pointing at this. Just okay, that thing over there. As opposed to kore is something you can hold because it's close to you, and sore is something that the listener can hold because it is close to them, but not close to you. Then the last one is do, and same thing with the others, dore and doko. Those are used for questions, which we will also go over in this today. We're going over making and answering questions too. Ko is close to you, so is close to the listener, a is far away from both of you, it's all the way over there, and do is used for questions. Alright, so here's a little list. They're going by the exact same pattern of ko, so, a, and do. This thing is kore, is close to me. That thing is close to the listener, sore. That thing way over there that's far away from both of us is are. And then which one, being the question, is dore. So it's all the same pattern across the board. The only difference is, I would say, over there for asoko, instead of just being akko, that's just weird. It just comes across weird. I don't really know exactly why it's like that, but just saying akko just sounds weird. That's just me, but that could just be me. I don't know. Same thing with the row 2, it's the same pattern. Koko, here. Soko is there. Asoko is all the way over there, far away from all of us. And doko is where? Kono, sono, ano, dono. Those are very important, and they're used even more than kore, sore, all that stuff. The re's in the first row and the no's in the third row. The no's are used more because it's used before a noun. Kono hon is the example that I was using earlier. Kono hon, this book. It's the one that I'm holding right now. Sono hon is the one that your friend is holding. You're talking to your friend, it's the one that your friend has. Ano is the one all the way over there across the room. And then dono is which one? What are we talking about? Asking that question. At least there's something that's consistent in Japanese. I'll give it that. Asking questions. We got a fancy little chart here with question words that you need to know like the back of your hand. First one is what, which is nan or nani. Either way, it's the same kanji, by the way. This changes depending on the ending that it comes before, I guess. There's a sentence that we say a lot, kore wa nan desu ka? Is, what is this? You hear at the end, it's nan desu ka instead of nani desu ka. That just sounds weird, that's just gross. You use nani usually as more of a standalone word, but then nan desu ka is another phrase just to remember. It's always nan desu ka, not nani desu ka. That's just weird. So yeah, it really depends on the situation with nan or nani. It's usually nan just because you use it in a full sentence, as opposed to like casually, you can say just nani as what. That's more casual than it is formal, because if you say nani to like your boss, he'll be like, excuse you? No. So nan desu ka is a lot more formal, and that's something just to remember to try and stay formal unless you're talking to your best friend. Number 2, doko, that follows the same pattern that we talked about a minute ago with koko, soko, asoko, doko is where. That whole list is like here, there, over there, or where. Dare is who, itsu is when, dono gurai is how long or how much. You hear that a lot as a set phrase. I just wanted to add it in just in case. And then doshite is why. You can also use nande. Doshite is more formal, but also nande is why as well. So I would stick with doshite again unless you're just talking to friends. Just as a PSA, I like to add in some things that are more casual because some people are learning Japanese just to consume media or make friends as opposed to working in Japan or doing things like that. So we are going to be talking about more casual forms in the future for sure to make sure that everyone gets what they need from these classes, because that's what I'm learning Korean for. I don't want to speak formally in Korean. I'm just here to make friends for that. If it's written down, unless I indicate it, if it's written down, that should be your go-to, because you usually want, in Japanese culture, you usually want to stay as formal as possible until, like, your friendship progresses or things like that. And then the last one is dore, which is which one. That was another one that was on the previous slide. 2, just for which one. It follows the same pattern. Kore, sore, are, and now dore. Let's do some extra phrases. Nan or nani kind of changes based on what comes after it. If you're asking nan desu ka, it's always nan, not nani desu ka. But then there's nani o tabemasu ka. If it's coming before a particle like that, you would use nani instead of nan, because like nan o sounds weird. This is not always the rule, but sometimes you can get away with it of if it comes before a consonant, use nan. And if it's before a vowel, use nani. There are some exceptions to that, but that could be a rule of thumb, especially for, the basic sentences that we're making right now. Again, same thing. Nani o tabemasu ka? What will you eat? Number 2 is where. So, doko ni ikimasu ka? Again, you use ni because you're with ikimasu. Same set phrase. So, doko ni ikimasu ka? Where are you going? Dare is who. So, dare ga sensei desu ka? Who is the teacher? Which, as of right now, is me, which is weird. I'm not used to being the teacher. When is itsu. So, itsu nihon ni ikimasu ka? When are you going to Japan? And I would answer that November, because I'm going again, which is great. For itsu, you don't necessarily have to use a particle, by the way, because I know like the previous 3, there's a particle right after it. You don't necessarily have to use a particle, but if you were to use a particle, you're fine either way if you want to or if you don't want to. You would need to use ni for that, because you're talking about time. Same thing with what we did earlier, Shichiji, 7 o'clock, you have to use time for that. So if you want to use a particle, you can, you don't have to, but if you do, use ni because it's time. The next one, dono gurai. How long, how much? Dono gurai benkyou shimasu ka? How long do you study? Same thing here. This one would sound weird with a particle, so I would avoid doing that, but if you do, you're not entirely wrong if you use ni, but still I would avoid it. Doshite is why. Doshite nihongo o benkyou shimasu ka? Why are you studying Japanese? And also, like I said earlier, this is also interchangeable with nande. It's just a little more formal if you use doshite. So it would be the same thing if you use nande nihongo o benkyou shimasu ka? That's also fine. Last one is which one? Dore ga ichiban suki desu ka? Which one do you like the most? Ichiban is most. Number 1. I wrote it out in Hiragana just in case. I've got friends here that don't know kanji very well, which is completely fine. Dore ga ichiban suki desu ka? Which one do you like the most? If you notice, all of these questions at the end end in ka. Every single one of them ends in ka. Because that's question particle. It's used to turn the statement into a question. You can, for basically all of those that I showed you, you can take ka off, and it's just a statement for the most part. The statement's here, kore wa hon desu. That's pretty straightforward. And you can just add ka at the end of it. Kore wa hon desu ka is this a book? You just change it into a question, which I love, because in a lot of Romance languages, you have to change the word order around sometimes. Like, you can see it in English. This is a book, or is this a book? Changes it around. Same thing with the second one. Anata wa gakusei desu. Same thing. Anata wa gakusei desu ka. Just add the ka at the end, and you're good. Yeah, same thing with English. You have to switch are you and all that stuff. This is a lot easier. You just add the ka at the end, and you're good. You do not have to have a question mark at the end. You can literally put it, just a period at the end of it. I'm putting question marks just so it's easier, but it's also written that way casually. Sometimes, in casual speaking, you can drop the ending verb occasionally. So, for example, I'll give you an example. I'm looking at the bottom one, the dore sentence. Dore ga ichiban suki desu ka? In casual speaking, you can drop the des at the end of it. So you can say, dore ga ichiban suki? You don't actually have to put ka there either. You just have to make sure your intonation is asking a question. So yeah, you can drop that. That's specifically for casual. Always, always, always put it down for formal. If you just want to ask if you like something in casual speaking, you can completely just drop the ending and that's fine. Do you like dogs, for example? So that'd be inu ga suki desu ka in formal. Or you can just say inu ga suki. You can drop that for casual. Ka is probably one of the easiest particles, which is great. There's another way to make questions. This is even more formal than the standard of desu ka at the end of it. The difference here is you're trying to be more indirect, trying to be more humble, being hesitant. It softens the question and makes it more respectful. The standard is desu ka, and then the more polite, indirect version is de shou ka, which you conjugate it exactly the same, you're just changing the little ending of it, of the tsu in there to shou instead. That's literally the only difference. There's not any kind of crazy conjugation that you have to worry about. So the standard is ima nanji desu ka or ima nanji deshou ka. It comes across a little less direct of, hey, what time is it? As opposed to, hi, can I ask you what time it is? It's kind of trying to be a little more sly, a little bit more hesitant, showing more respect for somebody, like, hey, as opposed to, hey, can I ask you this? You can be like, hey, sorry to bother you, but can I? Yeah. That's kind of the idea of desu ka versus deshou ka. Yeah, there's no crazy conjugation, you just change the little ending in there for des versus deshou. Nothing too crazy there. But it's good to know if you're wanting to speak more formally, work in business, that kind of stuff. But in the regular world, I guess, you don't really use it as much. You just can stick with desu ka. But usually in the workplace or talking to older people, just trying to be more polite or as polite as you can be, that kind of stuff. That's usually where you would use it. But standard, stick with desu ka, but that's just good information to know. So I wanted to give a couple examples of the two. So doko desu ka is where is something. Doko deshou ka is, hey, can I ask you where this is? It's a lot more mellow that way. Same thing here for number 2. Kore wa ikura desu ka? And kore wa ikura deshou ka? I'm American, so this is kind of my example of that. I know people are coming from different places, so you may not fully understand this. This is kind of what I think of it as. So, kore wa ikura desu ka is more like if you're at Walmart or Target, a more chill store, I guess. Like, hey, how much is this? Like, whatever. I would use ikura deshou ka in like one of the more high-end stores, like boutiques that are more expensive. It would be grocery shopping versus like wedding dress shopping. It's like what I kind of equate it as. I don't know if that made sense to some people, but that's kind of my example. Same thing, number 3, nanji ni kimasu ka? What time will they come? That's the more direct version. And then nanji ni kiru deshou ka? So the way that I will explain this is you can't be double polite. Kimasu, the mas form, is already polite in this case. Then you add deshou ka at the end of it. That kind of takes over the politeness. It's more polite than the mas form, so you focus on that. You can't say kimasu deshou ka. That sounds weird, it's too much. You take the one that's more polite and do that. So you do kiru, which is just the regular infinitive form, and then you add deshou ka because it's more polite than the mas form. You can't use both. You can't be doubly polite, if that makes sense. This is pretty easy. I just kind of wanted to show you this. Rewriting this from desu ka to deshou ka is pretty simple. So, kore wa nan desu ka goes to kore wa nan deshou ka? Same thing. You change the su in there to shou instead, and it's just automatically more polite. 2, same thing. Eki wa doko desu ka? Eki wa doko deshou ka? Number 3, nanji ni hajimarimasu ka? Same thing with number 3. You cannot be doubly polite here. So the mas form is already polite enough. So just use the infinitive and then add deshou ka at the end. So this would be nanji ni hajimaru deshou ka? Hajimaru deshou ka? So that is all I have here. Do we have questions? Do we have things I should go over again? Do you have a specific tool you recommend for looking up kanji? I have 2. One I do use more than others. So the main one that I use is the Jisho dictionary. It's a vocabulary dictionary that is very good. It will show you the kanji, it will break it down, and there's also a page in there for studying radicals, which is a huge thing for kanji, which will make your life so much easier if you know radicals. Like, for example, if you don't know what radicals are, I'll explain it real quick. There are little parts of the kanji themselves similar to other things. It may not be exactly the same, but similar to other things that convey some kind of theme. So for example, think of it's like 3 lines on the left side of kanji, like 3 diagonal lines. That is a radical for water. So you'll see that in the kanji for beach, pond, pool, sea, lake, all of that. So you know it has something to do with water. That like breaks down the kanji so much easier. So things like that will be great. I can add that to a lesson if you want me explaining radicals, because I love radicals because it makes my life so much easier. Yeah, so I use Jisho, and then also there's Wanikani. It's very highly rated. It's not for me personally, but a lot of people like it, so it's worth a look. Japanese and plural forms don't exactly exist. The closest I can say is, like, sometimes you can add tachi to the end of a subject. So, like, watashi is I, but if you add tachi is we. Usually, when it comes to subjects, it's just kind of understood by the context. Or you can use a counter for, like, a specific number of books, for example, which that is a whole thing that will take an entire lesson because counters are so hard in Japanese. I even still mix them up sometimes. So, like, for books, I think the counter is mai. If you had books, it would be san mai hon. Yeah, san mai hon. So, for these and those, not exactly. You usually stick with kono, sono, that, because it's usually understood by the context. That is something that we will have to work through for a while, because counters are very hard. If you see, like, a table of 5 objects, each of those objects probably has a different counter that you have to memorize. Like, flat things is my, like, the normal one. There's a list of counters for using su at the end of it. There's a lot to that, so that will take a while. Advice to you, because I will be coming back in 2 weeks for adjectives. My advice to you is to just kind of start getting an idea of how adjectives work. I will have charts, and for conjugation, because you have to conjugate your adjectives similar to how you conjugate verbs, so that's the whole thing. I'll have charts in there that'll make things easier, and I'll make sure I send them to everybody in the Japanese table so you can see them, so they can start making sense. It will take a minute for adjectives, because they're kind of difficult. So, yeah, my advice to you is to just kind of start getting familiar with it, get some vocab, like, down, just some basic adjectives, and we will work through that. Next week, that'll be, like, the whole lesson. Of course, I'll have that vocabulary in there, like I said. That'll be the whole lesson. We're not really going to be doing anything else other than adjectives.